All right, let's get going. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Cracking the Newcomer Code 2025. I'm Lisa Covens, Senior Vice President in Legier's Communications and Public Relations team, and we're so excited to share the newest edition of our Newcomer study, exploring how newcomers experience life in Canada, their challenges, sense of safety, and their relationships with financial institutions.
And I'm Jasmine Karhaneja, Senior Research Director from Legier's Public Affairs team. This is our third edition, Cracking the Newcomer Code 3.0, and it really builds on years of tracking newcomers' experiences and evolving attitudes. Today's story is about change in policy, perceptions, and priorities, and how that's shaping both settlement and integration.
We're also delighted to welcome Susan Sine-Stamp, Senior Vice President, Financial Services at Leger, who has been analyzing this part of the study closely.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm really looking forward to sharing our insights today. And just so everyone has a sense, I've also integrated results from our 2025 Financial Compass to help dig deeper into financial behaviors of newcomers.
So let's start with the context. Immigration has always been central to Canada's identity, but this year it's also at the heart of our national debate. The 2025 federal budget froze permanent immigration at 380,000 and halved temporary resident targets. So we're seeing real tension between economic needs and public sentiment. A recent Leger poll from early November showed that 74% of Canadians believe that reducing immigration targets for temporary and permanent residents to ease pressure on housing and public services is a good thing for Canada. And we also know that post-secondary institutions have been hit hard with this decrease as it impacts international students. In our own industry, we've seen several of the post-degree research analyst certificate programs shut their doors or pause for a few years just this past year. So these are programs that Leger regularly tapped when looking for new talent.
Right, and these headlines really tell the story. Immigration is leading every newscast. It's about affordability, it's about jobs, and for many, it's becoming political. And newcomers are paying attention. When the US toughens its stance, like we've recently seen with the new crackdowns and deportation rhetoric, it doesn't just stay south of the border. These ripples reach us here in Canada. It's no longer just a policy issue. It's shaping how newcomers feel about their future in Canada. So that's really where our story begins today. We're not just looking at numbers or attitudes. We're exploring how this changing global and political climate is shaping the newcomer experience in Canada.
So as Jasmine said, this is our third and latest wave of the newcomer study, and it's designed to capture how these shifting dynamics are shaping perceptions, experiences, and integration in real time.
So, what's new in Cracking the Newcomer Code 3.0? This year's survey captures over 2,000 new Canadians who arrived in the past 10 years. The data is weighted to mirror the 2021 census profile.
And we've also compared newcomers to a representative sample of the general population, over 1,500 Canadians, to see how their experiences align or diverge. It's a rich data set that gives us a full picture of integration in 2025. And both the newcomer and the general population data was collected using Leger's own Leo panel. And with that, let's dive into what we found. So when asked to rate Canada as a welcoming country, 78% of newcomers rate it positively. But here's where it gets interesting. When they reflect on their personal experience, that number actually jumps to 91%. So the image and the reality are a little different. And in this case, it's a good difference. It tells us that while the broader public narrative might sometimes sound skeptical, people's lived experiences are often much warmer. They're feeling welcomed, even if sometimes they're hearing otherwise.
But it's not the same story across the board. Younger newcomers aged 18 to 34 and those who've arrived within the last 5 years are less likely to say that Canada is welcoming, and that really reflects the climate they've arrived in. The public conversation around immigration has gotten tougher, so newer and younger immigrants are forming their impressions in a more uncertain environment. Meanwhile, people like me who came earlier, who've been here 6 years or more, still carry that sense of optimism and inclusion. So what we're seeing here is a changing context. The experiences of being a newcomer in Canada today feel different than it did a few years ago. Now, when we look at safety, the story becomes a bit more complex. Almost half of newcomers say they feel unsafe in at least one setting, whether that is in their workplace, neighborhoods, or community spaces. But the biggest concern isn't actually about the neighborhoods or workplaces. They're about public transits and online spaces. And when we look closer, women actually stand out, and about 1/3 say they feel unsafe on public transit. Similarly, visible minorities, particularly newcomers from Chinese background, are more likely to share that concern than their non-visible minority counterparts. It is a reminder that something as routine as commuting can feel very different depending on your background. And that's tough to hear because these pockets of uncertainty are about everyday places, the spaces you move through just to live your daily life.
And those small pockets of uncertainty seem to be adding up. We asked how newcomers' sense of safety has changed over time, and this is where we see something is shifting beneath the surface. 31% of newcomers say their sense of safety has deteriorated in the past year, while only 12% feel it's improved. It suggests that the broader social and economic tension that we're seeing isn't abstract. It's being felt personally. Newcomers are picking up on the uncertainty around them, and it is shaping how secure they feel. Their sense of stability feels a bit more fragile than it used to.
And when we think about why newcomers' sense of safety and belonging might feel less certain, part of it also comes from what they're hearing and seeing around them. 41% of newcomers believe that US-style crackdowns on immigration could happen here in Canada, compared to just 32% of the general population. And it doesn't stop there. Almost half, 47%, say they are worried about their future and job opportunities because some politicians are calling for a reduction in immigration. That anxiety is real, especially among young families and those on temporary to permanent pathways. So when political debates start to question your presence or your contribution, it shakes the sense of security, even if your personal experience has been different or positive.
So, despite those broader concerns we just talked about, it's important to note that trust in institutions, particularly the police, remains relatively strong. 82% of newcomers say they trust the police to keep their communities safe, and 74% trust them to treat people fairly, regardless of their ethnicity. That's encouraging on the surface, but it's a measured kind of trust. Most of it sits in that somewhat trust category rather than completely trust, which tells us that the confidence is there, but it's not really deeply rooted yet.
And again, there's more to the story beneath this headline. When we look a little deeper, the trust isn't equal across communities. Newcomers of Chinese and South Asian descent, for example, are less likely to feel confident that police will keep their communities safe. So newcomers want to believe in these institutions, and mostly they do, but experience, background, and representation still shapes how far the trust can go. And we've just seen that overall trust in police is fairly strong, but that trust is also fragile. About 15% of newcomers told us that they have had a negative interaction with law enforcement here in Canada. And for some communities, those experiences are far more common. South Asian newcomers, for example, are nearly twice as likely to report a negative interaction, 27%, compared to that 15% average. And that difference really shows up in the data on trust. Once someone has had even one bad experience, their confidence in police drops sharply in believing the police will keep their community safe or in trusting that people are treated fairly. It's a reminder that every single interaction matters because the everyday encounters people have with institutions like law enforcement can either build belonging or break it.
And when we zoom out, the picture gets more balanced. Despite the concerns we've talked about, a small majority of newcomers, 51%, say they feel safer here in Canada than in their country of origin. That's important context, especially since most newcomers didn't leave their home countries for safety reasons. They came here for opportunity, stability, or a better future. And they still recognize that daily life here feels more secure overall. So the trust story is mixed. There's optimism and confidence, but also a sense that Canada's safe haven image is being tested in real life. It's not a loss of faith. It's just a reminder that safety and belonging are things we have to keep earning as a country.
Now, if safety and belonging are emotional foundations of settlement, financial integration is the practical one. Building a life here means learning to navigate a new financial system, from savings and budgeting to understanding products and building credit. Money plays a huge role in how secure and settled people feel. And for many newcomers, it's one of the first areas where they begin adapting to life in Canada. So, in this next section, we'll look at how newcomers think about money, how they manage it, and what financial institutions can do to make the journey smoother.
And we learned from the first Cracking the Newcomer Code study we did back in spring 2024 that integration often starts with the financial system itself. For most newcomers, the first Canadian service they interact with is a bank, even before finding a family doctor or signing a lease. It's that first formal step towards stability and independence, the first time they really feel part of the system. And that means a lot rides on those early experiences. The way financial institutions welcome, guide, and support newcomers can set the tone for how confident they feel navigating everything else that follows. So now our colleague Susan will take us through this next part of the journey.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. Now, I'd like to start us off by situating us in the context of a newcomer's mindset when it comes to money. And this matters because we see that for just over three-quarters of newcomers, money is a private part of who they are. And this tells us a lot about how they might want to engage. And what we're also learning is that money isn't necessarily taboo because people don't care. It's private because it's deeply tied to how newcomers grew up. And this is something we uncover in our financial compass study that focused on the great wealth transfer. And through that, we see that 62% of those new to Canada shared that they grew up with financial topics being considered too sensitive to discuss. And so now that we understand where the mindset is, let's look at what drives a key behavior, and that's what drives saving money. So when we ask newcomers why they save, the answer is quite clear. It's not about status, it's about security. A third are saving for retirement or long-term security. Most are saving for safety, for family, and for a sense of stability in a new environment. And many are supporting loved ones both here and abroad. So saving really becomes a shared act, not just an individual one. And it's really about building a cushion that allows them to settle and plan for what's next, whether that's education, housing, or helping others make the move to Canada. Now, I'd also like to pause here to note that newcomers who are women are less focused on earning or building wealth and are directionally feeling less financially secure and independent than their male counterparts. And I mention this because at 53%, they represent the majority of newcomers to Canada. Now, newcomers most commonly start with one of the big five Canadian banks, which is the group comprised of BMO, CIBC, Scotiabank, TD, and RBC. And they are really drawn to these FIs through recommendations from others, through lower fees, brand recognition, or the brand's reputation.
So while we're talking about the big five banks here, we asked newcomers the first Canadian FI they chose to open a bank account with and the other ones they deal with. So we do actually have much more comprehensive data that can be purchased with a full report, including smaller banks, credit unions, and fintechs.
I really appreciate you sharing that important point, Lisa. I think it's good for everyone on the call to be aware of that. So now, if I were to just continue with the findings, we observed that high net trust and pride are key emotional drivers of relationships. And I want to look at this more closely. So while most newcomers trust their main FI, We also see that a quarter have switched banks at least once since arriving in Canada, with just over a quarter of those who've been here 6 to 10 years having done so. And so a key takeaway here is that a longer relationship does not always mean a better one. Now, when taking this into a more emotional outcomes focused space, while most newcomers say they're likely to recommend their primary FI, and you can see this at 82%, and nearly two-thirds are feeling proud to be a customer of their primary FI, this should be taken with a point of caution. And that's that through other pieces of leger research in the financial sector, what we are seeing is that intent to recommend doesn't equal action. So, in those other pieces of research, we uncover that among those not born in Canada, 52% say they have actually recommended their bank. And so, when you compare that to the 82, this is where the point of caution comes in from. So, this is another reminder about why positive experiences matter. They build trust and can turn what could have been a purely functional relationship into something that feels personal and dependable. Now, of course, that journey isn't always straightforward. Around 1 in 6 newcomers say they found it challenging to access credit cards or send money internationally when they first arrived. And a similar proportion shared struggling with getting a mortgage. Now, these are building blocks of participation, and when they are hard to access, it can risk making people feel like outsiders in a system they're trying to join. And it's a reminder then that, simple things like clear explanations or proactive support, they can really make a big difference in helping newcomers feel included. So, for me, I think back to my first bank account being opened when I was 12. And it was with the bank that at the time was my parents' primary bank. And there's a lot of research out there that speaks to how common occurrence this is. However, we'd already been in Canada for nearly 10 years by then, so I'd not had experiences with banks elsewhere given my age. But Jasmine, I think back to you having shared with me earlier some of what you found surprising, and it brought home so much of what we're seeing in our data.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, the banking systems can feel totally different depending on where you're coming from. For example, my first experience and my first surprise that was that I couldn't find a free bank account option. I was used to having a choice to keep minimum balance, and as long as you didn't drop below it, there's basically no monthly fee. So realizing that you have to pay a monthly fee even for basic accounts, that was definitely new for me. And secondly, I think the second surprise came when I tried to actually open the bank account. I started the process online, easy enough, but then I got stuck. I had to actually go into the branch to activate it. The system just wouldn't let me do it online. It stopped me halfway. So that makes me think that it's true for actually a lot of newcomers. There's these small moments of confusion remind us how there's a learning and actually relearning curve with financial systems here.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, especially the point around the relearning system. And, settlement doesn't necessarily end cross-border finance, right? So for many, it's shaping and sometimes even formalizing it. So even after settling, many newcomers continue to live financially connected lives that stretch beyond Canada. And we see that 69% send money abroad, and more than half are receiving money from family, and over a third hold savings or investments outside the country. And I'll get to that a little more in a minute. But what all of this, when we look at it together, what this tells us is that settlement doesn't end cross-border finance. It just reshapes it for the individual. And it becomes a pattern that reflects global ties and responsibility. And, I envision this balancing act between two homes, two economies, and often two sets of priorities. And it's a space where clarity, flexibility, and trust can really matter. And so, it's not just about everyday banking, and this is where I'd like to look at investments more closely. So, nearly half of newcomers already hold some type of investment, yet many are still navigating these decisions without professional advice. So, as I just mentioned a moment ago, just over a third of newcomers hold savings or investments outside Canada. And the main reasons include their comfort with the existing arrangements they have, tax concerns, exchange rates, and also limited knowledge of Canadian options. So it's not necessarily about shying away from investing as much as it is about a lack of familiarity with the Canadian system and solutions. So, because while everyday banking adoption is strong, investment participation remains limited, with about 4 in 10 holding none. And when we dig into that, we see that the reason behind it, so the key barrier is, a lack of knowledge for 1 in 5, and another 1 in 5 who cite paperwork as a key barrier. And so I'm going to pick back up the thread of investing without professional advice. And when we look at our financial compass results to see who newcomers turn to for help, we see that just over 50, so 51%, don't have an advisor, and just over 4 in 10 don't have a formal financial strategy. Now, that doesn't necessarily signal disengagement, but more so the opportunity to build a bridge between uncertainty and confidence. Because we also learned through our financial compass research that 6 in 10 newcomers would invest an unexpected windfall. But without a financial advisor, without a financial strategy, and with the barriers I mentioned a moment ago around a lack of familiarity and the paperwork involved with investing, there's potential risk against maximizing that windfall. Now, as newcomers put down roots, we're also starting to see a longer term financial vision take shape. So we have the majority who, pardon me, a majority at 58% who expect to give an inheritance one day, and then 43% who expect to receive one. And that's a powerful signal of intergenerational wealth planning amongst newcomers. And for many, wealth isn't just about accumulation, it's about responsibility, family, continuity. And these conversations are as much about care as they are about capital. And whenever I've had the opportunity to speak about inheritance behaviors, I am just always struck by the gap between those who expect to give and those who expect to receive. There just consistently appears to be many future beneficiaries who are unaware of an inheritance in their future, which limits their ability to plan ahead. And the gap between these two groups is notably wider amongst newcomers. Now, Canada is leaving its mark on newcomers' attitudes towards money, and for most, it's in a positive way. But this coin has two sides. So, on one side, we have 35% who say they've become more disciplined about saving and budgeting. On the other side, we have 37% feeling added pressure and stress about money. So it's a mixed picture. It's a story of growing confidence, but also higher expectations. And it reminds us that financial integration, it's not just about access to products, it's about emotional reassurance too. It's about helping people feel secure as they grow. It's just as important as helping them build their wealth.
This makes me think how back home most people have built-in security net, family, friends, or familiar institutions to lean on if something goes wrong. But here, that safety net doesn't exist in the same way. And at some point, it hits you that if you face a setback, you're on your own. And I feel that realization brings the kind of discipline. You make sure that there's always a buffer, that little rainy day plan, just in case. But that discipline often comes with stress because the system here is new. You want to do the right thing, invest, plan, grow, but you're not always sure how. So I believe there's an opportunity for financial institutions to meet that discipline with guidance to help newcomers channel that motivation into confidence and familiarity. And with that in mind, Lisa, over to you to share your thoughts on what we see looking ahead.
Thank you. So that balance, being more disciplined but also more anxious, really captures the newcomer experience overall. It's about striving for stability, building something new, and constantly adjusting to life here. And as we look ahead, there's something truly reassuring in what newcomers are telling us. So despite everything, the uncertainty, the change, the challenges, 87% say they're hopeful that Canada will continue to uphold its values in terms of tolerance, democracy, and freedom. And that really says a lot. It's a belief that even though through hard times, the foundations of this country are strong. And when we asked the ultimate question, if you had to make the decision all over again, would you choose to immigrate to Canada? The answer was clear. We asked this the first time we did the study in spring of 2024, and two-thirds, 67% said yes. We asked it again, and this year that number climbed to 72%. And that's powerful because it's happening despite the challenges we talked about, despite affordability concerns, political debates, shifting perceptions. Most newcomers still believe in that Canadian dream.
So let's wrap up with our 5 key findings from this year's study. Firstly, newcomers feel welcome, but they are watching the winds shift. Most newcomers do feel personally welcomed, and that's encouraging. But perceptions of Canada as an inclusive country are a bit softer, shaped by rising anti-immigrant rhetoric globally and even here at home. So while day-to-day experiences remain positive, the broader environment feels more uncertain than it used to. Secondly, we've seen that many newcomers feel less safe today than they did a year ago, especially in public spaces and online. But trust in police is there, but it's uneven across communities and easily shaken by personal experiences. Even so, newcomers continue to express faith in Canada's values and confidence in their decision to build a life here.
And then the third key takeaway is about their financial life and having become more disciplined, but also more stressed. We see that Canada has had an impact on how newcomers manage money. They're budgeting more carefully, saving more intentionally, but they're also feeling the pressure that comes with navigating a new financial system. And we also highlight that money can be private and the learning curve around fees, credit, and investments can add to the stress that they're experiencing. We also learned that, first impressions, they really are everything. For many newcomers, integration literally starts with the first bank account they open, and that first experience can set the tone. And most people do stay loyal to that bank for years, but again, those early experiences matter. It's really a reminder that culturally attuned, welcoming service early on can build relationships that last a lifetime.
Last but not the least, there's a word of opportunity that is still untapped. Newcomers remain globally connected, sending and receiving money internationally, holding assets abroad, and often expecting inheritances. Yet few work with advisors or engage with more complex financial products. There's a clear opportunity here for financial institutions to step in, to earn trust, build familiarity, and help newcomers turn potential into participation. Together, these insights point to one central idea. Newcomers bring optimism, discipline, and trust. And the opportunity now is to meet that with understanding, innovation, and inclusion. If we get that right, Canada doesn't just stay a welcoming country, it becomes a place where belonging and opportunity truly grows together.
Great, thank you. So this is just a small preview into the study. And by the end of today, you will receive a link to this webinar and a link to where you can download this presentation. You can also purchase our full report with all of the questions and more. There were some, if you can believe it, that we didn't highlight today, cut by key demographics such as age, ethnicity, country of origin, as well as financial institutions used, products held, etc. Our team would also be happy to talk to you about custom research we can conduct with our newcomer panel and our regular panel. We can also use Leger Digital's hard-to-reach solution if you have a research need that requires a niche audience, such as a specific demographic within a specific geographic area. For example, we just did a study with French-speaking Canadians who live in the north. So that's a bit needle in a haystack, and our Leger Digital team was able to deliver on that. So this solution has been really instrumental for our team. And our dedicated financial services team, led by Susan here today, focuses on financial experiences and priorities through custom and ad hoc studies, or through our new Financial Compass syndicated study. And lastly, our next big webinar features our annual youth study on December 10th, so be sure to sign up. So Canada's newcomers are resilient, ambitious, and hopeful. They remind us why measuring perception matters and why we love doing this study. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation, and we look forward to continuing it together. And now I am going to look through some questions that we have, and the font is very small. So this one I will ask Susan. Do we know how newcomers' financial attitudes differ to financial attitudes of other groups in Canada?
We do have that across different pieces of research, including this one, and some of it was highlighted here. So, uptake of certain products and services, their length of staying with their original financial institution. It's a very nuanced topic. So the short answer is yes. And then really getting into how I'd love to have a conversation, learn more where that's coming from, and dig into it.
Great, thank you. And a question, will this presentation be shared with attendees? So yes, the actual presentation deck that you saw today will be shared, as well as the link to the webinar. So I think we will be sending a link to download the presentation. And then the third question, would it be fair to say that newcomers' not entirely positive experiences of Canada/Canadian institutions have had a negative impact on how they perceive the trustworthiness of Canada and Canadian institutions? Jasmine, do you have a point of view on that? Do you want me to repeat it?
Sure. No,
You
I
can
heard
see
the
it?
question. Yes. Um, I mean, there's some truth to it. The negative experiences do have an impact on the trustworthiness of institutions and of Canada. But I would say it's not fair to say that it's entirely dependent on a personal negative experience, because we've seen that even those who have had negative experience, they did say that they still trust, like 68% of them still trust police to keep the communities safe. It is vastly different than those who did not have an experience, but it doesn't mean that it just takes away the experience. So I mean, while there is a need to build that trust, there is need to avoid the negative experiences, but you can't just say that it's totally dependent on one negative experience of the person.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting a weird warning here. I'm going to stop my share screen. Sorry about that, everyone. New technology, we're in a new office. All right. Is everyone just seeing us now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So do we have studies related to newcomers and housing? So was it our first one or our second one, Jasmine,
It
that
was
asked
the
about or that
first
related to
one.
housing?
In the second one, actually, we had some great insights about housing and newcomers.
So yeah, so we can reach out and share that second presentation as well. So here is a question for Susan. Much of the financial literacy literature, that's a tongue twister, mentions budgeting as a safe money tactic. Is this still a good tactic or a nuisance?
I mean, November is actually financial fluency or financial literacy month, so love the question. I would say it's always a good tactic for everyone. Budgeting, especially when there's this level of unpredictability or uncertainty, and elevating your own. The more you know about the system, the more you work with experts or ask those questions, find the right information, the more just in control you can be, the better the decisions you can make, the more confident you feel. I would never feel that it's a nuisance.
Thank you. And then there was another question, are there studies on newcomers' attitudes, integrations, and the impact of social network or safety net? So in terms of social network, I can answer this. We do have a Leger digital study that was just released. I believe it was in September or maybe late August, that has a really large sample size and includes a cut of newcomers, and it talks a lot about the digital behaviors among all Canadians, but including newcomers, and how and there is a cut of how newcomers' behaviors differ in terms of social media. WhatsApp, I know newcomers over-index on WhatsApp usage. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, at Leger, we have a whole bunch of different studies beyond these ones that specifically focus on newcomers. At Leger, we have made an effort to have a good sample size of newcomers for all of our research that we do, including the financial compass research Susan mentioned earlier had such a large sample size, and she was able to dig back in and cut the data based on newcomers because she did have a large sample size in that. So there's almost all of our studies can be looked at with that lens, which is really fabulous. So I'm looking at the next question. So when it comes to where integration truly begins, where does life and health insurance fall in the progress chain? Jasmine, do you remember? We would have had that in our 1.0 study.
Yes, yes, we did have. And I believe it's the uptake is lower from what I remember, but I think there are more details in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, our team will reach out to you and give you that link to that study. And then does the opportunity for culturally tuned, welcoming guidance for this audience extend beyond financial organizations, specifically thinking about the role large retailers might play in creating certainty in a newcomer's initial experience in Canada? This is also a great question. Our 2.0 study, we looked at retail behavior, particularly in grocery and beauty products. So yes, we did look at that, and yes, certainly found that retailers have a role to play in terms of integration into Canada and feeling welcomed as well. Um, are there comparisons in regard to the financial institutions between newcomers and those born in Canada? I am wondering if this is a personal issue or really cultural or immigration. Susan?
So, I mean, yes, we do have those comparisons. So in our data, we are able to identify with whom the respondents have a relationship, be it a primary relationship or secondary. And then we can go back to our Gen Pop, we can go back to the financial compass. We have a lot of sources we can compare to. That would require a lot of, more of a custom take on how we look at it. But I'll tell you at a high level, adoption of the big five, I mean, it's relatively in line with everyone else because they're the big five for a reason.
Thank you. Another question, when we say newcomers, does it include newcomers as temporary resident status, or is it PRs and citizens? So our definition, for the purpose of the study and for most of the other studies that we do, newcomers includes anyone who have come to Canada in the past 10 years. So because it's a big span in, well, 10 years, it does include all of the above. So we have citizens, permanent residents, um, temporary work visas, as well as temporary student visas, as well as refugees. So we have all of the categories covered. We feel that it's important that they all have a voice in this study, so that is how we classified. And then somebody asked that for a summary of a full list of topics covered and questions asked and data cuts included for all, and could the comparisons across all three waves of the study. Yes, anything is possible and customizable. Reach out to our team or we'll reach out to you. And yeah, again, about a question about the previous studies, yeah, we can get access to that. And then we had similar to the question I asked a couple questions ago, does your study look at the differences between categories of newcomers? So those who may have come under humanitarian or economic category. So we have based on whether they're temporary foreign workers or students. I don't, Jasmine, we don't ask that question of what the
We
Canadian government would have classified, do we?
we don't, but we do have this information in our first where we asked what was the reason of them arriving here.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Just seeing if I'm missing any. Feel free to put any other questions in the question and answer. So this question, given BNPL's higher adoption among younger Canadians and newcomers, are you seeing signs that they're becoming more reliant on BNPL for budgeting or affordability? Susan, do you know that answer?
Do we have more on what's up here with NPL? I'm
I'm not
looking.
actually sure what that acronym
No,
means. I was hoping you would know.
I mean, I would have loved to have known, and I
Maybe if this person could put it in the chat, that would be great. And then am I seeing any other questions? Oh, buy now, pay later. Oh, I should have known that. My bad. I was actually thinking it was an acronym of a financial institution, which was
it's funny when you kicked it over to me, I was like, okay, that it must be okay. So reframe.
so
Do you mind
I'll re-ask the question now.
Thank you.
So sorry about that.
No problem.
So given buy now, pay later's higher adoption among younger Canadians and newcomers, are you seeing signs that they're becoming more reliant on these, like on buy now, pay later options for budgeting or affordability?
Got it.
That makes
Thank
more
you.
sense.
So much more. I appreciate you, Lisa. Um, well, it's interesting because so we didn't go down that specifically, but we also did see the somewhat greater difficulty with even just acquiring, let's say, credit. So we want to keep that in mind that it's going to, I would imagine, vary depending on how that pay later product is positioned and to whom it's targeted. There are some offerings that really are for customized for different types of individuals. So, but again, in our research, we're seeing that that access to credit, loans, things of that nature, it's a little harder to come by.
Thank you. And then does the study cover any other industries or is it FI focused? So we talked a lot about the public affairs type questions like safety, feeling welcomed. This particular version of it is focused on financial institutions and attitudes towards money. But we do, like I said, have a lot of other data behind the scenes. So reach out to our team or we can reach out to you to tell you what detail we have. But like I mentioned, the last version had retail focus, and then the one before that was also financial, but a different take on it, as well as insurance. So let me just see if there's any other questions. I think I might have answered them all, or with Jasmine and Susan answered them all. So with that, we've got it's 1:45, at least in Toronto. Thank you again for joining us today. We were really excited to talk about the results of this version of this study. And yeah, feel free to reach out and look for our email this afternoon. And if you have any further questions, we'd be happy to talk to you in the future. Take care.